Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. It has been a long week, and with half-term commitments and other nonsense, we have not been able to schedule a crossover with Villa, but I do have a fresh set of opinions on what has been an eventful week. So my name is Greg, and today I'm joined by my good friend and wonderful co-host, Oscar. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I think I'm not sure relief is the word, but it's not far off. But it's just finally sort of over.
Yeah, just the 7 short games remaining of the season, and well, I guess let's start chronologically since the last time we spoke. So, officially relegated now.
Yeah, I mean, not massively surprising. I think it was just sort of prolonging the inevitable, to be honest. So it's interesting. Lots of stuff that's come out since in the last sort of few days and since it happened. And I think in reality, it's what the club expected from the beginning. Again, judging by some of the stuff that's come out recently, how much of it's actually accurate, I don't know, but it does seem to all reflect like it would be. I think the Juric thing, I think, was probably, as we sort of said all along, I think he was just there to be a bit of a patsy and take the fall, ready for next season, just so that they can get someone else in to have a fresh start.
Do you think if he'd have got just like 2 or 3 wins under his belt, he would have been the manager next season, though?
Maybe. I mean, I think if he'd have even if he hadn't, but it actually made a go at changing things in a positive way, I think he might have had a chance. It doesn't seem like that Sports Republic have always been the most forward-thinking group, but I suspect they were just buying themselves a bit of breathing time until Spurs had sort of had his time to get his feet under the table, and if it had worked, they would have said, yes, we're geniuses and we should be praised, but it didn't, so we're back to the drawing board again.
Yeah, but at least with a bit of time to spare and some to forward think and almost get ahead of it this time, right? So that's a positive. Assuming that is what is going to be done and not like the January transfer window where it's like, well, I know it started a week ago, but we're going to sit down in a couple of weeks and figure that out.
It sounds like there's been a bit more planning behind the scenes recently. I think we actually had a shortlist this time, which is a nice surprise. And, to be honest, a lot of the names that have been mentioned, I'm not too mad about in terms of the managers. I think we know about Danny Roll. I know a lot of people think it's just because he used to be with us fit, but I think it's a good fit in lots of different ways, to be honest.
Yeah.
Will Still's been mentioned quite a few times today, who's another one that, he's certainly pretty prevalent in sort of, I know there's been a lot of memes about him not having his his pro license or whatever, and how much he costs Rhymes every time. I think it's Rhymes, isn't it? Every time that he manages a game and things like that. But yeah, I think it's a positive thing. It's interesting that the interview with Martin's come out recently as well, and a few people saying, "Oh, maybe we shouldn't have got rid of him now." And yeah, it's all a bit.
It is an interesting one. Two out of the sort of the main list of 3 or 4 people that we've seen floating about, who do you think is most likely? Do you think that Roll is the top choice?
Yeah, I think the Danny Roll thing makes sense to me. I mean, he's been at the club before. He's got good experience of the Championship, operating with pretty little budget. We should have a budget next season. I'm not saying we won't, but. And the fact that Spurs knows him as well, and it's the sort of football they seem to be wanting to go back towards, the Red Bull style of things. I know that Red Bull themselves have actually expressed a bit of an interest recently, or certainly the rumours have been going with that. But he would be the one that I would look at and think that would make sense, and especially as there's a good chance that he could contribute to Portsmouth being relegated as well in the meantime.
Lovely.
He could already come in as a hero.
Are there any names? Zach and I went through the list quite early on, and were a bit surprised by some of the names on there. Are there any on the sort of the list that you really don't want to see come in?
Like Liam Rossignol, it seems to be sort of quite a fashionable choice. I don't know. I don't know enough about him. I think he did a reasonably good job at Hull. I don't know probably enough about him to really comment. Steve Cooper's another one that's been mentioned. Not exactly inspiring, but if that's going to be someone that's going to get us straight back up first time, maybe that's something. He's got a good level in the Championship. Is that, it might be one of those things that's not particularly inspiring, but to be fair, I think Leicester probably maybe thinking in hindsight, would they be in a better place now than if they'd gone with the fashionable new choice?
I think Zach described it as the rotating door of yo-yo clubs.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
selection.
I think you sort of, it's one of those. He's almost becoming going down the sort of the Pulis and Allardyce and Steve Bruce route, isn't he? Where it's going to be one of those sort of the old guard almost now. It's just a change of the old guard there. But I don't know. I wouldn't be against it personally, but yeah, is it going to be something to build with long term? I don't know. He hasn't seemed to have had much joy in the Premier League. He did a decent enough job with Forest, to be fair, but there's a reason that Forest didn't really warm to him, and I think Leicester. I know they're Forest rivals, so that probably contributed, but
we had to have a laugh at Russell Martin making the list, and surely that's too ridiculous even for us, right?
That would so. Not. I know Leicester have been linked with him again. I could see that being something that happens where a promotion rival get him and he ends up getting promoted ahead of us. Again, there's been some interesting tidbits come out of the interview he's done with Gary Lineker. It does seem like he's genuinely a really good guy and was well liked at the club, and I think everyone was sort of hoping he'd do well. But I think everyone knew that sort of his race was run, and I think
just a bit too stubborn for his own good, right?
Huh?
Just a bit too stubborn for his own good, I think.
Yeah,
the end.
I think to an extent, I think that the dice didn't fall favourably for him. I think had it been different, it could have. But I think realistically, I think the fans weren't going to tolerate him till the end of the season. Like once you lose the fans, that's pretty much it. And I think he said himself he knew at half time that he was done in that Tottenham game. So if he knows it himself,
physically felt the turn in the stadium. There was I can't describe how that is to you. Unless you were there, you can't describe it. You physically felt the turn on him. It was such a...
I was there. It was a bit like... I don't know if you were at the Nottingham Forest game when Nathan Jones was in charge.
Yes.
That felt like a bit of a turn on him as well. I mean, not that was obviously a bit quicker, but...
that had been brewing as well. That wasn't such a rapid turn. Whereas, there had been chatter about Martin before, but it was really like the nail in the coffin at that point. But you're right. I think he did get unlucky. I think I've gone back to it before, and I'm sure we'll touch upon it when we sort of get towards the end of the season and look back at the season as a whole. But I think there are 3 or 4 games quite early on in the season where effectively bad VAR decisions cost us, and if I think any of those go the other way, I don't see why we couldn't have gone on and built a bit of momentum and actually done quite well. It's just
I think it's interesting, and again, some of the stuff he's spoken about with him saying that he went into the Premier League with a weaker squad than he was in the Championship with. I'm not so sure that I agree with that. I mean, would Che Adams have helped this year? Probably. I think he would have been better than what we've got, but that still doesn't mean he would have been good enough. I think not getting a striker or not getting a striker that's good enough is probably ultimately what was costly, whether we kept Che Adams or not.
I don't think it's so much about the outward players. The more I've sort of thought about that sentiment, as much as it is a comment on how bad the recruitment was. I mean, don't forget that our marquee signings were Ben Brereton, Diaz, and Maxwell Cornet. So it's I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Maxwell Cornet even played for us this season.
Yeah, crazy, right? That is how long the season's been. Well, we've got much more to touch upon as we sort of move forward and through the week. But first, a message from our partners at Bioniq.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN 2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Okay, and we are back. So, yeah, obviously a lot from... I think we've covered the first day of the week so far, and then what do you make of Rusk and Lallana in charge for the rest of the season then? It's logical, right? You don't want to see anyone else come in before that, surely.
Yeah. I think we've spoken about it before. To be fair to Rusk, he did well in the games that he came in. He actually made us, probably of the three managers we've had this year, he's probably made us look the most defensively solid in all the games.
I think in the press conference today, it was Adam Blackmore that said that with one game and 1 point, he has the highest point percentage of any of the three managers this season.
Well, so. Exactly. But on top of that, the fact that he actually got a point, like I said, we looked like we were built on a more solid foundation. Just do that in a few days is interesting. I'm not saying that I think we end up keeping him or we end up with him and Lallana. But don't get me wrong, I've heard quite a few people say that Lallana is really highly rated as a coach and his football knowledge is good. I think Rusk mentioned it today as well. So,
when he plays as well, his footballing intelligence and experience is clearly very high.
Yeah.
And, he came through our system at a time where our system was notorious for how good it was. And so he clearly has knowledge of those structures.
Yeah.
So
and you'd like to think he knows the club. You'd like to think, I know he's had a up and down history. Well, only really because of one incident, but he's, I think, a bit of a polarizing character, should we say, amongst the fan base. But I am slightly of the opinion that if you do go for a Will Still or if you do go for one of these fancy new names, they are coming in to put themselves on the map, to try and then eventually going to move on to a bigger club. That's why I'm against like a Frank Lampard or one of these managers that, I would much prefer some. Obviously, everyone probably would, but if you can get someone that has some association with the club, they might actually have a bit more of a long-term desire if they do well to stay, rather than a manager that does well and then in 6 months' time, oh look, Lampard's gone and he's gone back to Chelsea, or various things. So yeah, it would be nice if it works out. Why not consider them in the long term? Or consider Lallana as let's just see what happens, really, I guess. But I think in the short term, it makes sense.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's familiarity, right? Like these 7 matches are. I mean, there's still some. Zach kept making the point. There's still something to fight for to get past that sort of record of being the worst team ever. But even at this point, with a team that got relegated the earliest than ever, so that argument's almost moot anyway to me. Like it's there. That's right there along with worst. So, but it will be interesting to see what they bring through, what lines up. You're saying to Zach, it says a lot about the standards that we have come to believe in this season, that really all I hope for is that he plays players in the positions that they play in.
Yeah.
And I think at that point I'd be happy because we haven't seen that.
No,
we did see that for a bit against Palace, and then we just threw that out of the window again. On Saturday.
I agree. I think, and I think it from what it sounds like, the players didn't massively buy into what Juric was doing anyway. So maybe it's a way of getting some of them back on board for next season. And it sounds like maybe there was more to the Flynn Down situation that Juric didn't mention. So maybe a few players like him will it might help. Obviously, I don't think there's going to be people clamouring at the door to sign many of our players, but it might help us keep a hold of someone. And again, like Rusk said, I think start building towards positivity for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you'd like to think that Rusk and Lallana will be involved in some capacity anyway, right? Not necessarily with the first team. I can definitely see a future for Lallana working with sort of the youngsters in the academy, but you'd like to think that they can make a positive enough impression to stay involved, whoever we sort of end up
100%.
going with.
I think it's important to have people involved. I know we've spoken about it before, and Zach said not just chucking out roles for the sake of it and token gestures. But I do think it's important to, if it's the right person and if it's relevant to the sort of situation, to have people involved that are part of the club. I mean, most of the clubs do it. You just don't necessarily hear about it.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
Yeah, and it's not like we're talking about like Man United paying Alex Ferguson $2 million a year just to show up. Like his football wealth and knowledge of experience is something that's going to go a long way. And we've seen that Rusk is sort of brilliant with developing youth, so that's going to be a big part of Sports Republic's plan going forward. They've never sort of made that a secret, that getting our academy back to that level and bringing the youth through into the first team and having that path is part of what they want. And so having footballing brains who can sort of deal with that transition from youth to senior is going to be an important part of that. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one. All right, I'm going to cast our mind forward to Saturday a bit and talk a bit about Villa. But first, a message from our partners at Zencastr. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr. Okay, and we're back. So, with it being the first game since we're relegated and the poor home form we're in, is it a bit of a chance for a bounce playing Villa in between two games against PSG, knowing that they've got work to put in next week after the midweek game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult to say because I think they'll be a bit stung by that PSG result. There'll be people that will be keen to be involved in the next leg. So it could go one of two ways. I mean, I think we caught Palace on the back foot a little bit after the cup. So maybe you'd like to hope. I think it might. I think it takes a bit of the tension out, probably, of the crowd. I know there's still the points record that we want to try and break. But again, like you said, I agree. I think it almost seems like that is a back seat now. I think that we ultimately are down in that position anyway. So maybe there'll be a bit more freedom. Maybe there'll be a bit more. I think they've known they've been relegated for a while, probably since at least January. I think they've known that it's going to be a difficult situation. So, but maybe it just gives a bit more freedom everywhere. And what is there to lose now, realistically? Like, we can't be much worse than we already have, to be honest. I don't think.
We've talked before about how like the tension at home adds to that sort of pressure cauldron, and you'd like to think that that'll be relieved a bit as well. It might not be a positive, particularly atmosphere or jovial, but I certainly don't think it'll be quite as biting or as sort of harsh as it has been.
I think it's more positive than it would have been if Juric had still been in charge. So I think people will at least recognise the fact that they've realised that. Well, I think, to be honest, they've probably been planning on doing it for a while. I know it was they were waiting. They didn't wait for long until relegation was confirmed before pulling that trigger. And I know it's to do with a clause that they had that basically meant that they could get rid of him as soon as relegation was confirmed. But either way, they could have stretched it out for a bit longer if they'd have wanted to. So I think that will bring a bit of positivity, and again, people like to see something different. So maybe it'll be a different shape. Maybe it'll be just something that people can get their teeth into. And as you say, obviously Villa are a very good team. Their eye must be off the ball a little bit, and that's the one nice thing about about us playing this season is that almost we are a banana skin for every team we play against because we're so hopeless. I think most people think, oh, well, that should be a stroll in the park. And we've caught a couple of teams out with it, and, Palace being one of them. And maybe we can just get a third win. That would be nice.
Yeah, crazy to think that we might. And then at that point, right, the rest of the season is a complete free-for-all because we've beat that points record and it sort of is what it is. And we'd almost have the monkey off our back because our home form is so atrocious that to get a win at home would be almost unthinkable at this point. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how we line up. Do you think, knowing how Rusk lined up in that draw where it was sort of very defensive, do you think he can get away with that at home because we've been so bad at home? I don't think it's the sort of style that would normally sit well, but
yeah, I don't disagree. But Villa have got good attacking players, so let's make no bones about that. But also, I think just because we haven't seen, I think I know we've seen a few plucky defeats, and we've spoken about that in the past. But I think just a narrow defeat where we look like we defend quite well, we actually look like we can throw bodies on the line, I think will be seen as a positive. Villa are. Let's look on the face of it. Villa are where we probably aspire to be, and where we aspire to be. And there's that interesting dynamic. I know when Gerrard got sacked around the same time as we set. I can't even remember who it was now, but it was when we sacked Hasenhuttl, actually, wasn't it?
yeah,
And they went and got Unai Emery. I'm not saying we ever have that pull to be able to have done that. We got Nathan Jones, and the rest is history. But yeah, I think you have to be realistic and say Villa are where they are. We have, as long as there's a bit of fight, I think the fans will be happy. To be honest, even if we lose, because we've lacked that, and I think they've almost admitted that that's the case. So yeah, I don't think we can afford to be too picky. To be honest,
I think you're right. I think it'll be a fascinating game for so many reasons. And it's really hard to go in with a prediction because of that, because there are just so many unknown variables and moving parts, right? You don't know. Villa's squad depth is ridiculous, so even a rested Villa team is going to have the potential to do us tremendous amounts of harm, but also we're going to be set up completely differently. We're going to be, who knows, sort of what Rusk's. I know that Rusk came out in the press conference and said that if you get a clean sheet, you're always getting something, and that's where you start. But I don't necessarily think that means that he wants to play, 11 men at the back and play that style. So
no, I think it's what we've spoken about in the past. You build off a solid foundation. You can't build off of a poor defence. It just doesn't work. Not in the Premier League. Not when you're inferior to the teams you're playing against. If you're better and you can outscore them, then maybe. But I don't think we're good enough to be outscoring teams. So we have to start with that. And again, maybe we get a bit of a new. Well, it's not really a new manager bounce, is it? It's a second manager bounce. The second time he's had a bite at the cherry, and he got one. He got more of one than Juric did. So maybe we can see another bounce.
Are there any players, because there's an argument that to name a team similar to how we lined up at against Palace would be a sort of a reasonable pick. But do you see any of these sort of players who have been out of favour coming back into the mix with Rusk in charge? Are there any names?
Maybe. I'd like to
see more of.
I don't think there. I think there was probably something going on, or certainly he didn't seem to know how to get the best out of Dibbling. So maybe that would be a way. And again, Martin alluded to it a little bit in the interview he did, where he needs a certain type of encouragement or a certain type of way to be treated. So maybe that might be something we can start to see a bit more, a return for him. I don't know. I don't think we saw enough of Rusk to say, who he might favour or anything like that. I think it would be a pretty strange thing to change too much from the Palace result. And I didn't manage to catch much of the Tottenham thing, and to be honest, I didn't really want to catch up with it, given the doom and gloom around it. So
we changed to back four. It was baffling. It was just It didn't show up for the first half, and then did for the second, but it was too late. So
yeah, it sounds about right.
It's classic. I mean, it's the story, the same story that we've had all season. You could listen back to any one of our match reviews of the entire season so far, and it's
Yeah.
exactly the same. I heard Charlie Taylor's name banded around in the press conference today. If I'm honest, I'd forgotten that he was still kicking about with
Yeah,
us. So.
yeah. I think it said he was carrying a knock, but maybe that's why he's had that all year. Again, he's not really been spoken about too much, which is another interesting one, because I would have thought he would have been someone that would have added. I know that the reason, well, we allege that the reason he was dropped was because of the situation in the Leicester game where he didn't get out to the ball quick enough. It seems harsh for that to have stuck for 3 managers since, though.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
Maybe. And did Ross Stewart get on Saturday? I think he did for a bit,
Yeah,
didn't
he had a cameo, so it'll be interesting to see if we manage to get much more out of him this week.
Did he manage to make it to the final whistle?
He did. So whether between them, Ross Stewart and Tallpool can manage 90 minutes, I don't know. But I mean, I said to Zach yesterday, it's crazy to say this as a sentence, but almost at this point, if he's fit, how can you justify leaving our top goal scoring striker off the pitch in Tallpool? So.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's probably the logic, is that it seems Tallpool has a limit on how long he can be on the pitch before he just completely puffs out. So,
it seems to be about 45 minutes, but we try for 60.
Yeah, exactly. And then as soon as he's puffed out, then you chuck Ross Stewart on and see if he can last for the remaining 30.
Yeah, collectively one player for 90 minutes is. Hopefully, that's whoever comes in next season. That's something we sort out, because I've never known anything like it. I remember I hark back to the days of Pochettino, where he had them doing sort of double training sessions in pre-season, so that wasn't a problem, and we were one of the sort of fittest teams out there. And it's to see such a vast difference this season is.
I think it's tricky. I think obviously because of the way Martin played, very possession heavy, very much the ball does the work, not the players. So fitness probably, understandably, wasn't a priority. So you can probably see that we aren't. It'll be interesting to see all the running stats and things like that, which is why flipping to a way of playing which involves a lot of running was an interesting way of looking at things. If you don't mind defending, but.
I saw an interview on TalkSport with Ricky Lambert that alluded to that being like the main problem, is that not that we change styles as much as how drastic the change was an attempt to be in the middle of the season. Like, it was just doomed from the very get-go.
I think it was like that was a bit like the it's a different situation, but the same sort of outcome was the Nathan Jones situation. You've gone from playing very aggressive counter-pressing football to long ball to no one, but trying to play direct football with a squad that isn't built for it. Like, a squad is built for a certain thing. It's been built by a manager for a certain reason. You can't just flip and change it without a transfer window.
Yeah.
So,
well, hopefully, like you say, at the very least this weekend we'll see a bit of fight, some players played in their correct positions, and some stringing some bits together to at least see some sort of progress and unity, because you're right, it's a lot to ask for a win against frankly a very informed. I don't think losing to PSG could be considered a knock to form, to be honest. That's I think that's a fairly reasonable gauge. But before we go, score prediction, what do you think?
That's a good question. I think I'll go for a 2-1 to Villa. I think, I just think they've got too much quality across the pitch that we can. I think we can lay a glove on them. We can maybe catch them out and go one up, and then I think their quality will prove too much, and then they'll come back and score a couple. But I think it'll be a bit tighter. I don't think it will be a drubbing. I'll go for that. What about you?
Well, Zach picked a 2-1 win, funnily enough.
Okay.
So I went for a 1-0 win, with the thought path of very similar to you, that we'll go ahead reasonably early on because we'll catch them off guard, and then suffer through the most painful 60 to 70 minutes of football you can experience, which will make the win even better.
I'm not sure. Yeah, we can hope.
I don't know. Maybe
I'm
there's
not sure I
some
can
sort
cope with
of
it, but
yeah. Maybe there's some sort of self-loathing tied into that mentality somewhere, but it really feels like the sort of story that this season has sort of led to. It would be fitting for it to be a painful win.
to be fair, it would be very Southampton for us to go and win every game for the rest of the season now and just miss out on staying up by like a point.
Yeah,
That
would be brilliant, especially as we've got Arsenal and City at the end of the season as well. It would be.
Well, if we can do something to disrupt someone and annoy someone for the rest of the season, that would be nice as well. But I don't think we can actually even affect too much. But
Leicester away coming up as well, which has already got people on social media dubbing as perhaps the lowest quality game of football in Premier League history.
Yeah.
El Crapico for sure. But
yes, 100%, and we'll be there for it.
100%. That's what we live for. All right, well, Oscar, thank you very much for joining me. It's been great catching up on your thoughts on the week. Hopefully we start next week with some form of positivity as we carry on through. Either way, we will be back on Monday. Whatever happens, we will still stick with it and be here. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you then.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.